Good evening. Thank you for attending the Springford Area School Board meeting Monday, January 22nd. Please rise for the pledge.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Springford Board of School Directors believes the community has the right to bring before the board issues and concerns they may have about items on the agenda or about items in general which affect the district or their children. Because of this belief and philosophy, the board will schedule a time at the beginning and conclusion of every meeting to have an opportunity for community members to share their concerns with the board. At the start of the meeting, members from the public may comment on agenda items only. The school board will move through the meeting agenda, then at the end, when prompted, there will be a time for public comment. This meeting is being filmed to be broadcast on community cable channels and online. Individuals intending to make public comments should be aware that they are being filmed. Speakers will be asked to state their name and the area in which you reside before your comment.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight. I think I can still say Happy New Year, given that this is our first meeting of the new year publicly. So with that said, Mrs. Bickert, can we please have a roll call?
Yes, all board members are present.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Mr. Rizzo, do you have any announcements?
I do not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then as far as announcements go, our board has met in executive session. We met prior to today's meeting at 5:45 p.m. to discuss a variety of personnel issues. With that said, we'll move on to section 1, which is public to be heard on agenda items only. If there is anyone in the room that would like to speak, please approach the podium with your name, township of residence, as well as the agenda item for which you are speaking.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Hi, my name is Susu Ajazi, and I'm from Collegeville, and I'm a senior at Springford High School. And, oh, do I have to sign in on the, okay, perfect, thank you. And I came to talk about the SNAP item on the agenda. I just wanted to say that personally, as a senior, I really value this program, and I really hope that you vote to push this through and fund us for this year. It would really be a really big help, and a really big help to the community, as a lot of seniors every single year attend it, and it's a really great program, and many people look forward to this event at the end of the year. The only reason that we have a downturn in community involvement is simply because people aren't aware of it because of COVID, and we haven't been able to recover from that. And just simply having the event and being able to hold that is really important. Every year it grows. So having any help is really great and amazing. And we would really appreciate your help. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
and for those following along at home, that was in reference to item number 10 on the agenda. Thank you. Anyone else that would like to approach the podium?
Sorry. Hi, my name is Cassandra Dryberg, and I am here in support of SNAP as well. I'm a junior at Springford High School and a member of the SNAP Club, and I'm here representing other juniors in support of SNAP who couldn't be here. I joined this year after volunteering last year at Post Prom, as well as several other SNAP events, such as the Prom Boutique. I would like to talk about why I love the SNAP Post Prom party at Arnold's and why I think it should continue. The Post Prom party was such a fun experience. Even as a sophomore volunteer, I could feel the excitement from the other students. It's a night to be with your class for one last time, to see people who you may not see again, and to enjoy your time with them. Towards the end of the night, I was no longer needed as a volunteer, and so I was allowed to enjoy the party. I ended up singing karaoke with a group of seniors, many of which I had never met. When I think of post-prom, I remember that feeling, and I look forward to my own party at Arnold's when I'm a senior. I will volunteer at this year's post-prom as well, and I look forward to that, as I can see all my senior friends before they head off to college. Overall, it's a really great experience, and I hope it can continue for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else that would like to approach the podium? So the question is, no. So we will have a formal presentation discussion on SNAP. That'll be when we get to item number 10, but unless you would like to make a general comment for the public. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, well, with that said, we're going to move on to our board and committee reports. And given the inclement weather that had forced us to move the work session, we have all of our board and committee reports on the agenda tonight. So I would just ask, since we do have to get through a lot, that our board members who are reporting out to keep it as tight as possible, but of course, please make sure that, as always, we're giving the public enough information to understand what it is that we're discussing at these meetings. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Weingarten for policy.
Thank you. Excuse me, our policy committee meeting was Wednesday, January 10th. It was well attended. I'd like to welcome Heidi Goldsmith as part of our policy committee. On that Wednesday, we discussed, let's see, our policy 239 was reviewed after being sent to the solicitor. Policies 216.1, 233, 833, and 833.1 were reviewed and will be sent to the solicitor for review. I believe you can access these policies on the district website. And are they included in this copy of the agenda?
If there was a first read.
If there's a first read, it would be listed in the agenda. And to make this short and sweet, that's what I've got for policy. Our next meeting will be February 12th at 6 p.m. in the district office.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments with regards to policy from our current board members? Okay. Thank you. Dr. Wright, Curriculum and Technology.
Thank you. The Curriculum and Technology Committee met on Wednesday, January 10th. You will see a couple of things on the agenda about it, but I would also like to thank the administration of the Curriculum and Technology Committee for the good minutes that they provided and notes. The Spring-Ford High School course selection guides were updated. We had Dr. Collier and Dr. Edwards there to provide information regarding the course selection. Some of the highlights include the addition of an honors behavioral science course for seniors and honors geometry at the 10th and 12th grade center. You also see that on the agenda there's a dual enrollment agreement with Immaculata University. Dr. Collier shared information about a dual enrollment opportunity for Spring-Ford High School students who are taking advanced placement courses, AP courses. This opportunity will be available beginning in the 24-25 school year, and students will be able to determine if they wish to pay the additional $125 per credit for an Immaculata University credit. Both ways, it would also be Spring-Ford credit on Spring-Ford transcript without cost. Dr. Collier has confirmed with the university that all IEP 504 accommodations will be honored because the instruction takes place from Spring-Ford's teachers, and they will follow what they would do without a dual enrollment course. So we were very grateful to hear that. Updated course name, additionally, for the behavior science course, you'll see this on the agenda. Dr. Collier provided information about why the naming of the course needs to be adjusted. So an action item is on the agenda to make the change just to the title of the course, not the course had already previously been approved. Additionally, we had information from Mrs. Gardy regarding the Summer Rams planning for future programming. It was very informative. She gave a lot of information about it. As you are aware, the Summer Rams program has been funded by ESSER money and was put into place specifically regarding learning loss. So she brought information about the projected budget should the Summer Rams program be operational in 2025 and beyond. At this point, based on the data and feedback, the administration recommends a discontinuation of the program due to declining interest and rebounding achievement scores. If you had noticed also with our PSSA scores and things, we have definitely made grounds of improvement of that learning loss. So the question was asked how that data compares to the total population and students, and so we had that information. So we're very grateful for Mrs. Gardy taking what limited data and information we had and bringing that together. So that is not on the agenda. It's just was an informational piece at this point. And summer RAMs will take place this summer and will be paid by ESSER money. So we're talking about the following year. And then regarding our structured literacy grant updates, Mrs. Gardy provided an update on the current expenditures for the structured literacy grant and information regarding the outcomes of the audit that was required as part of accepting the grant. So we were very pleased to hear some of the information, some of the things that we are going to be able to provide to our students based on that grant. So the next meeting will be held on Monday, February 12th at 7 p.m. in the district office conference room. So I believe that's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Wright. Questions, comments? Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Jackson, moving on to finance.
Thank you, Madam President. Finance Committee met on January 17th. There were no questions at the initial start of the meeting. New business items that were discussed were the executive monthly reports through December 31st, 2023. Under that item, liquidity is $140 million, cash on hand. Revenue, interest income, EIT, and transfer tax are exceeding the plan. On the expenditures, health insurance claims were over $500,000. Special education is over plan primarily due to the new court-mandated age increase. Transfer tax, 92.7 of the annual budget goal is achieved. Very strong in reaching our goal in 6 months. Earned income tax, very strong pacing between 13.5 mil and 14 million for the year. Food services, 345,000 meals were served, a net profit of $500,000 to help with equipment replacement plan. There was a presentation by SNAP. On their old business, the 2024-25 budget timeline was reviewed for informational purposes. The refunding of the Series 2018 bonds that were approved back in April 2023 is now back in the money due to the recent interest declines in the 10-year Treasury. Paperwork is underway for updating. And that concludes our meeting for finance. It was well attended in person and on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Questions with regards to finance? Okay. Moving on to property, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Madam President. Property was held on January 17th. Under old business, there were updates on the Geyser program. It's about 98% complete. There are 2 outstanding items: chillers to be installed in Royersford and Limerick Elementary School. All the piping and wiring is in place. We're waiting for a delivery date of the chillers. This is really part of an ongoing issue throughout the country right now with deliveries of mechanical equipment. School police and safety updates. The school police and our administrators investigated 24 safe to say tips since November 14th, 23. The school police and our administrators investigated light speed tips, a total of 22. All monthly fire drills, evacuation drills, and ALICE drills were completed per safe school requirements. Our school police and administrators conducted the threat assessment meeting for the first Monday of every month per Act 55 requirements. And a big shout out to Lieutenant Phillips and the school police. They supported over 100 families during the annual holiday support program. Always the high point of the meeting. Grants. The second part of the PCCD grant, 38439, is the purchase of 80 digital radios and 145 spare batteries. The radios and batteries are a vital part of our overall security communication plan. The radios and batteries are in order, and we're waiting an ETA. The 23-24 PCCD grant for school safety was announced on January 11th of this year. We, the district, are applying for a competitive grant up to $450,000. We will be sending out requirements for quotation involving access control systems and physical security assessments by security contractors. On the training for the police department, all officers were TASER recertified on November 20th by the Upper Providence Police Department. And with that, that concludes my comments. With the exception, I would like to give an extremely big shout out to the operations, the facilities group, led by Mr. Dan, Mr. Sean. The last couple of weeks, we've had horrible temperatures, snow, ice, and they have provided safe walking steps on the sidewalks, for the driveways, for the buses, for the students, for the staff, for the administrators. They've done just an outstanding job, and it would have been very disappointing if we would have cut our snow budget last year. So a big thank you for the facilities department for keeping our schools safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson, any questions or comments? And I do echo your comments with regards to our facilities crew. Great job. Okay, we are moving on to Dr. Wright, MCIU.
The MCIU meeting will be this week, so coming up. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Mrs. Weingarten, Western Montgomery Career and Technology Center.
Yes, the JOC met on January 8th. We started with an executive session for the reorganization of the JOC. I'd like to welcome Mr. Rizzo. He's now the superintendent of record, and I'd like to welcome Mrs. Hermans and Mrs. Goldsmith to serve on that board with me. Keith McCarrick from Upper Perk was designated the new chairperson, and I will be the new vice chair for this year. Patty Grimm from Pottsgrove is our treasurer, and J.P. Prego is our secretary from Upper Perk. So during the public meeting, students attending the Skills USA Leadership Conference reported on their experiences. And it's really remarkable when the students come and tell us what they got out of this. There were 21 students from the Tech Center. There were 6 tech schools participating in the Skills Leadership Conference competition. So there are over 300 students, 300 students total. Mr. David Livingood shared that the CLNA, and I forget what that acronym is for, was basically a review of the enrollment data for each program. And they discussed the high priority jobs, how we work with the Workforce Development Board, and it was essentially a very detailed look at the 17 programs. And I do have a document I can share with you if you're interested in any of those details. And right now, we have, enrollment is open. It is expected to close on March 15th. So what's very interesting is we expect to have about 400 applications for students to fill 233 program seats. And right now, we have approximately 192 applications received, so almost halfway there of what they expect this year. At this same time last year, we had 139, and the increase was likely a result of the awesome response of the open house this year, which is why we're predicting about 400 applications. Some of the details, in case you're curious, Pottsgrove has this was from the 8th, so I'm sure all of this has grown since. Pottsgrove is at 47, Upper Perk has 45, and Spring-Ford has 54 applications from just the middle school. I don't have the numbers on the, no, I do have the Spring-Ford High School numbers are 9. The highest count for applications is cosmetology, my abbreviation, apologies. Intro to Med and Culinary are the top highest right now. There was a discussion of the possibility of inviting our teachers during maybe a development day to tour the Western Tech Center to see what goes on and to help them think about practical applications in the classrooms. For example, using examples to calculate square footage, using chemistry, and helping make practical classroom examples in the Western Tech classrooms. So that was a very interesting conversation. Some important dates coming up: January 24th, the Skills USA Culinary Competition only. February 5th is our next JOC meeting at 7 p.m. And February 5th and 6th are the remaining competitions of Skills USA. And I think that's everything from our last meeting. Anything to add? No?
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Weingarten. Any questions or comments? I will just say that when you hear the numbers for enrollment and the increase year over year from the last couple of years, it's almost like it's a great problem to have, but it just opens up a whole other conversation in terms of like how do we meet future demand at the Career and Technology Center. So, I'm glad to hear that the word is getting out on, what I view as the best technology center, Career and Technology Center in the state. So, thank you, Mrs. Weingarten. All right.
One quick question, Mr. Weingarten. Was there any discussion regarding budgets?
Not out of the ordinary budget approvals. I'm just double checking. No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Westwood, Legislative Committee.
Yep, thank you. The meeting took place December 6th at 6 p.m. And just a couple quick highlights since I know we have a few reports tonight. First on the agenda was Representative Scott sharing his thoughts with the group regarding the need to reimagine the education system that included things like universal pre-K and equitable opportunities for all. He did some conversation around building leadership matters, the systems that are needed to provide good principals with the autonomy to do their work. And the group discussed some of the barriers to this, such as mandates, for example, that get in the way. There was also conversation about the Montgomery County Superintendent's Legislative Committee and plans for advocacy this spring. So that will include an opportunity for superintendents to visit the Capitol on a non-Day on the Hill event. There was some conversation around House Bill 1422. So if you're not familiar with this, this is the bill that was introduced by Representative Joe Cerisi around cyber charter reform that did pass the House earlier last year in 2023. There are some resources on this if there's any interest in me sharing the link with others. There was some hope for some movement on House Bill 301. This is a school code bill, waiting on some additional updates for that. Lots of other notes I have, but I'll go through just really quickly, probably one that's interesting. So related to Act 33, House Bill 301, which are school code amendments, they were signed into law by the governor after this meeting. Specifically amends the school code bill to implement pieces of the 2023-2024 budget for education and make policy changes. This includes things like funding for libraries and community colleges and the money that was designated for Level Up that will be used for facility improvements for grants that are authorized under said bill. A couple of things this contains that I think are important to note: school mental health grant funds, Social Security, Ready to Learn block grants, career and technical education subsidies, school safety, et cetera. There were a number of other bills that were discussed post that, but for essence of time, I'll probably pause on that for now, but if anybody wants more information, happy to share. The next meeting will be February 15th at 6 p.m.
Thank you, Mrs. Westwood. Any questions or comments? Mrs. Goldsmith, PSBA?
There's no report for this month.
Thank you very much. And with that said, I'm going to jump in here for the Spring City American Legion because actually Mr. Lackey, their meeting is this week, correct?
7
Yeah.
o'clock.
7 o'clock on
On the 25th.
the 25th.
Spring Hotel.
I am going to bring up Spring City American Legion a little later in the meeting as it relates to board comment, so I'm just going to hold off on right now. Although I do believe that we all received an update with regards to the most recent meeting minutes, which I think was November. I did see that in my inbox, so please reference that if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out to our Legion representatives. Okay, and Mr. Call is not with us today, so Ms. Stein, it is on you.
Thank you. So this is our January student rep report. So as far as past events go, we have winter sports have started throughout the district. They are up and running. The ACT was administered here at Springford on December 9th. Winter concerts also started the week of December 11th. And then winter break was from December 15th to January 2nd, so I hope everyone in the Springford community enjoyed that long break. And then there was another day off. The district was closed on January 15th for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And then there was also a school board reorganizational meeting on December 4th. And then for our future events, there we go. We have midterms started for high school students on January 18th, and they will continue until the 23rd. I believe that's Wednesday, yeah. And then, yes, Wednesday, I think. Yes, Wednesday. And then the second quarter will also end on Wednesday, January 23rd. So students, make sure that you have all your assignments submitted by them. And then high school course selection will be starting very shortly in the upcoming week. So make sure, high school students, you are thinking about your courses for the upcoming year. And then there will be another day off, no school for students on January 31st. And finally, there will be an in-service day on February 19th for President's Day. And then, as always, continue to read the weekly update for district-wide news and make sure to keep up with your current assignments. And that concludes my student rep report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stein. Any questions or comments? Okay. Good luck on midterms.
Thank you.
All right. Going to Dr. Murray and Dr. G for Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you and good evening. Thanks to the generous grant from Pottstown Health and Wellness, 5-6 will be the lucky recipients of several nutritional assemblies led by our favorite registered dietitian, Adrienne Delgado. Dates are currently scheduled for March. Evans Elementary is in the middle of a building-wide fruit and veggie challenge. So far this month, students have eaten more than 2,500 pieces of fruits and veggies while at school. Our school nurses have kicked off the 14th annual district-wide weight loss challenge. Over the years, they have raised $9,210 for SNAP. On January 10th, several of our district school psychologists participated in a free online training with Dr. Summer Bishop through the MCIU. The training focused on ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder, symptom manifestations in individuals and of different ages and levels of ability, as well as on differentiating between ASD and other neurodevelopmental disorders in children. A very valuable training for our school psychologists, and it was free. As we look ahead to the 24-25 school year in special education, we are excited to welcome, so far, 73 early intervention students transitioning to kindergarten. And finally, each December, Ursinus College holds a Martin Luther King Jr. essay contest, an opportunity open to all students in grades 5th through 8th. The contest's purpose is to encourage young people to celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. through inquiry, reflection, and personal expression. Congratulations to 8th grade student Charlie L. for winning the grades 6 through 8 essay contest. She was awarded a certificate earlier this afternoon. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you very much. Dr. Murray, do you have anything? Combined it? Okay, wonderful. Any questions or comments? Okay, moving on to superintendent report.
Yeah, just two brief but important things. First of all, our retirees. We have several. First, Court Bigelow, 35 years of service as an elementary teacher in the 5-6 grade center. Jennifer Clark, 33 years of service as an elementary teacher at Oaks. Bruce Jake Cope, 35 years of service as a Spanish and French teacher at the high school level. Kathy Emsweiler, 24 years of service as an IA at senior high school. Betsy Fulton, 25 years of service as an administrative assistant at the 7th grade center. Chris Jennings, 30 years of service as a band teacher at the 7th and 8th grade level. Cheryl Murgia, 31 years of service, English and communications teacher at the high school. Mary Lou Honorado, 25 years of service, reading specialist at Spring City. Susan Trimble, 34 years of service as an elementary teacher at Royersford. Daisha Williams, 33 years of service as an elementary teacher at the 5th, 6th grade center. Sherry Wilson Garvin, 24 years of service as an IA at the 9th grade center. Total years of service to Spring-Ford for all of those employees, those professionals, 329 years. We thank them for their service to Spring-Ford and for having a positive impact on so many of our young learners. My second announcement is January is Board Appreciation Month. Yes, I am. At your seats, you saw a certificate from PSBA as well as some artwork provided by some of our students. Please enjoy. January is designated as School Director Recognition Month, which is a time for us to celebrate and recognize the challenging and vital work boards do on behalf of our students, our schools, and our families. Access to high-quality public education is crucial, not only for our children's success, but for the strength of our society. It takes a team of dedicated people, that's teachers, administrators, support staff, parents, and community members, to provide that education. The 9 members of your local school board are a key part of this team, making informed decisions that shape our public schools. On average, school directors devote up to 10 hours per month. We are on the high end of that average. We tend to bring that average up here at Spring-Ford, to the complex responsibilities of board business, including adopting policy, voting on budgets, reviewing hiring decisions, and attending sometimes lengthy and challenging meetings. Board service is an unpaid position, and the majority of school directors cite their desire to give back or contribute to public education as the main motivation for their service. As locally elected officials, school directors are invested in their communities. They are our neighbors, our friends, local leaders, parents, and engaged citizens. During this month, designated for recognizing these public servants, please take a moment to express your gratitude for school directors' time and effort year-round on behalf of our communities. The job they do ensures our schools continue to provide opportunities for success for every student, even during unprecedented circumstances. I want to say thank you for advocating on behalf of our collective interests and for the benefit of our children. On behalf of our leadership team, thank you very much for all that you do. If you're new to this table tonight, we welcome your feedback, your input, and your contributions as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rizzo. This is, I've volunteered a lot in my life, and absolutely this is the most rewarding position and enjoyable position being at this table, so I very much appreciate it. And I just have to say that this picture brings me such joy because I really hope this is a self-portrait of me. I think that's how I'm taking it. It's me and at the computer, and it warms my heart. So this means more to me than most things. So thank you for that. Okay, it is cute. With that said, Mr. Fitzgerald, Solicitor's Report.
Good evening. I actually have no report this evening.
Thank you very much. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll move on to the voting portion of our meeting, and I do know that since this is our first meeting coming together after reorg, while many of our new board members have attended meetings and understand the process, I will just reiterate what we are going to go through here, which is in light of the fact that we did not have a work session, our voting may or may not go a little longer because there may be some questions and discussions as we go along, but generally there are 4 parts to this, which is I'm going to go through each section. At first, I'm going to give you an opportunity to take a minute to look to see if you want to separate anything because you might have a specific question on an item. So if you do, when I call out a section, please let me know if you want to separate any of the letters. From there, I will ask for a motion and a second, both on what was separated and the remainder. And then from there, questions and discussion. And then we go to a vote, yay or nay. Okay? So we'll start with section 3 minutes, letters A and B. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Is there any opposed? Okay, that motion passes 9-0. Moving on to section 4 personnel, letters A through Q. Since there is a bit, I will just give you an extra moment to look at it and see if you want to separate anything.
Could we separate out letter N?
Separate letter M?
N, as in Nancy,
As
sorry.
in Nancy, excuse me. N as in Nancy, okay. Anything else? Okay. Okay, so we'll first vote on section 4, letters A through Q, separating N. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions and discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries 9-0. Now, looking at Section 4, letter N as in Nancy, do I have a motion? Is there a second? Okay. Questions and discussion? Mrs. Goldsmith?
So the one thing I wanted just to verify, because the way it's written, it's kind of been interpreted by different people in kind of two different ways. Is the 6,500 a total cap for all 7 employees, or is it up to 6,500 for each of the 7 employees of the police officers?
It is a total of 6,500. The number of employees that are listed there is because they might shift on and off, but it is 6,500 total, not each.
Okay. And then the other question I had about that section was that I noticed that's for the summer RAMs. And looking at the ESY program and the summer RAM program, they kind of serve about the same amount of kids. So what was the, and I'm sure that there is, what is the rationale of why we're utilizing police officers for summer RAMs, but we're not utilizing them for the ESY program?
I can speak for Summer Rams. When we started a few years ago with that, we were concerned with the heavy traffic and just having some additional hands on deck at the time. It was also in the beginning of COVID, or mid-COVID. So we wanted to have some extra hands on deck should there need to be any additional needs. So we have continued that as part of the ESSER programming, and as part of Summer Rams. They do support as needed, but I don't believe that they were ever needed at ESY, but we have on occasion, if needed, been able to pull them.
So they're able then to serve both for the ESY program as needed as well?
I would say as needed.
Okay.
Anyone would ever step in at any point if needed, but they really were put in place for the Summer Rams programming.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Moving on to Finance, Section 5, letters A through H.
Can you separate E, please?
Okay, I will separate E.
Could you separate D?
All
6
of
and-
D?
No, just 6 and 7.
Okay, so we're separating E and we're separating D, letter 6 and 7. Any others? Okay. So, looking at Finance, Section 5, we're going to be voting on letters A through H with the exception of D6, D7, and E. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, questions and discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries 9-0. So let's go in order. We'll start with Finance D6. Do I have a motion? A second? Questions and discussion?
It really is a question. The question is it, and I know what LifeWorks School is, and it usually provides social emotional support, but it talks about providing educational services for a total amount of $39,050, but I wasn't quite clear on what that actually entailed. Is it psychological services? Is it mental health work? Like, what is it, the $39,000 that we're voting on?
It would be the tuition for the student to attend.
Okay, so that's a tuition, okay.
Correct.
And then is that the same, well, number 7, oh, sorry, I'm supposed to wait to go into number 7?
Why don't we take them, so it sounds like that was your question.
Yeah, so it's
All
a
right, so
tuition.
we can then vote.
My apologies, Mrs. Weingarten was pulling me aside there. Could you repeat that?
I just said, did I go on to number 7 now? But I think what Mark says is we stick in
Yeah,
number 6.
let's stick with what we are on. And so is there any other questions or discussion with regards to D6? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries 9-0. Moving on to letter D7. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, questions and discussion on Finance D7?
So it's kind of the same question. So I know it says BCBA services, but is that a total amount of hours? Is that for a contracted employee? What is it in terms of that relation to?
Yes, it's for a contracted employee for needs that came up at a particular building from a move-in student.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or discussion? Okay, with that said, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, the motion carries 9-0. Moving on to Finance, Section 5, letter E. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, questions and discussion. Mrs. Weingarten, you brought this up.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that this is part of the process, that this is not the final number.
Yes, and Mr. Jackson, I know that you were talking about this in Finance Committee, so is there anything else you would want to reiterate with regards to that?
No, this is the same dance we do every year. This is a check your box. It's a legal requirement, and we've done it every year that I've been on the board, so that's almost 9. So that's it.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries 9-0. Moving on to property, Section 6, letters A and B. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Questions and discussion?
Were these discussed and vetted at the property meeting? I was not able to attend.
Yes, Dr. Wright, they were.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, with that said, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Moving on to programming and curriculum, Section 7, letters A, B, and C.
And Mrs. Hermans, I would just ask
Yeah.
for item C, if we can just have that subject to final review of the solicitor's office, that would be appreciated.
I was actually going to ask to separate out Section C.
For that purpose?
For part of that, for that purpose.
Okay,
but
so then I will
issue.
still separate it.
Okay.
Okay, so I will separate C. Any others to separate? Okay, so we'll first look at Section 7, letters A and B. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, questions and discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries 9-0. Moving on to Section 7, letter C. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and so questions and discussion. First question, Mrs. Goldsmith, one moment. Mr. Fitzgerald, do I need to specifically, or should I have specifically stated as part of Section 7C that we need to say subject to final review, or is your comment good enough?
My comment will note that for the
Okay,
minutes.
great, thank you. Mrs. Goldsmith?
So in looking, and I'm going to apologize right now, I'm a lawyer, and so unfortunately sometimes I look and talk like a lawyer. And I know Mark is a very capable lawyer, but obviously when you give me a legal document, I look at it like a lawyer. So here are some concerns I had, and Mark, I know this is subject to your approval, so I'm just going to, make them aware for, the public at this point in time. One of them is the indemnification clause, and just, again, for just practical purposes, indemnification basically, in layman's terms, means that if someone sues somebody else, I step in and basically pay all the costs. And we kind of have dueling indemnifications clause where we indemnify Immaculata and they indemnify us. One of the concerns I have is, one of the questions when this was brought up in curriculum was the fact that it was happening on site with school district employees. But under the memorandum, there is the summer program which will be occurring at Immaculata as well as the online program. Under the indemnification clause, where Springford is indemnifying if Immaculata gets sued, one of the things we're indemnifying is C, which is the negligent, intentional, wrongful, or other tortious acts by any third party, not an employee, representative, agent, independent contractor of Immaculata. So again, as a lawyer, we always look at any worst case scenario. So theoretically, with that section in there, if one of our students attended a class on Immaculata's campus and had a slip and fall or something happened to them not by an employee of Immaculata, if Immaculata got sued for that, we would actually be indemnifying Immaculata for that. So that is one of the concerns. The other two concerns, and I did raise this a little bit I did raise it at the curriculum meeting, was in terms of the Immaculata Online Scholars Program as well as the Summer Scholars Program. Again, coming to this from a special education lens, there are two competing laws that kids K through 12 really have access to, which is IDEA, not competing, they're in tangent, but IDEA and Section 504. But when kids graduate, they're only subject to 504, and colleges are only required to give 504. So if we are utilizing this outside of it, there's nothing in this contract that requires them to adhere to the IEPs of our kids. And so I think this is great, and I know that sometimes, you know, when you bring up concerns, it raises the specter that you don't agree with the program. I think the programming is great. I think having this opportunity for the kids is great. I just want to make sure that, one, we're not possibly getting sued for things, and two, we're making sure that all of our kids have access to that programming.
Mr. Fitzgerald, you'll look into it?
Oh, yeah, I agree. I mean, I hate indemnification provisions, so we'd certainly attempt to negotiate them out. This is an aggressive one. That's why I'd prefer to put that clause in there, and we can talk to Immaculata.
Thank you. Yep. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Goldsmith. Any other questions or comments?
So once the final review will come back to us next month, or no?
No, I mean, you're going to approve it, and then, I mean, I've certainly heard some direction, you know, from one of the members. It sounds like that's a general consensus to see if you can whittle that down. And there's some other considerations that are kind of on my end that I want to work through, just in terms of implementation.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, so all those in favor of Section 7, Letter C, subject to final review, say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed?
No.
Okay, that motion carries 8-1. Moving on to conferences, Section 8, letters A through G. Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions and discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Okay, moving on to Section 9, Other Business, letters A through D. However, letter A is only a first read, so really we are only voting on B, C, and D.
Separate D.
Separating D. Okay. Any others? Okay, so we'll first look at Section 9, letters B and C. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Questions and discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Moving on to Section 9, letter D. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Questions and discussion? Dr. Wright?
Thank you. I'm very glad that we are participating in the DECA state competition in Hershey. It states here that we have 8 staff members who would be accompanying the students, and that the only cost to the district is 3 days of substitutes. My question is to administration, is regarding the registration, lodging, transportation, and meals for those staff. If that is something that we are paying, why is it not listed here as an additional cost?
It is not something that we're paying. The only cost to the district would be the cost of sub-coverage. The students are paying for the trip, and that will range from $400 to $525 per student, depending on the selected lodging choices. There's single, double, triple, and quad. So it ranges between $400 to $525 per student, which includes room, food, transportation, and registration.
For the chaperones as well.
it's a good question. I have to follow up on that.
Right, so, so normally I think with that kind of cost, depending on whether they're staying over, and transportation could run the district into like over $1,000 or more, or $1,000 or more per chaperone. So it's not that I don't think that we should be paying for our chaperones to attend, because I do value this, but I'm hesitant to vote on something without having all the information. So I'm not sure how we want to pursue that, if we want that information first, or if this is a concern regarding deadlines.
So it would be a concern regarding deadline. This trip does occur in February, so we would not have, if we were to push it to the February board meeting, we would not have it in time.
I'd like to follow up on Dr. Wright's comments. There's no cost shown, as she mentioned, and this is pretty cut and dry. And to ask the board to approve this, I will not support this without knowing the cost of the item. And it's not an issue of not supporting the ask here. It is not knowing what the ask is. So I think there needs to be a definition. And how many students are attending this based on 8?
About 140.
Okay. Thank you.
Could we put a not to exceed number?
I don't know. How would you validate that or vet that?
Could look at what we paid last year, if it's should be documented. I'm unsure, Mr. Fitzgerald, if we are allowed to amend this at this time if we chose to do that.
I mean, the other option is our work session is on the 20th. I know it's cutting it real close, but could we vote on it at the work session in February, if that is a concern for the board?
I have it's not necessarily about when we vote on it, but just a clarifying question regarding student activities within the state. Am I correct in regarding athletics, the district pays for all of these things when they're traveling in state for competitions?
We have a policy that identifies clubs and band events, PMEA, orchestra, chorus, and then state athletic competitions. It's articulated in there. Clubs are generally not covered at the state level. It's usually student expense. I can pull that up, but its policy was approved.
So this is at the state level, but this group does not fall under that policy?
They are identified in that policy. All groups are identified in that policy. It's just depending upon what group they belong to determines whether or not the district covers the expense.
Okay, thanks.
This was a conversation we had last year. Same thing, same appearance of inconsistency. Okay.
Well, if that is at will of the board to have that reevaluated in policy, I mean, that is something that could be pulled up in the agenda for policy in February, and we, as part of the policy committee, Mrs. Goldsmith, Weingarten, and I, along with Mr. Rizzo, could take a look into that. I'm seeing heads nod, so is
Great
that...
idea, great idea.
Okay,
Yes.
great. It sounds like
that
I'm
is
seeing
a-
heads nod, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're good. Okay.
And so that's a little bit separate from the task at hand regarding this agenda item. I guess I'm looking for direction from Mr. Fitzgerald on what we can do to get this
Yeah,
done
I'd be
today.
concerned about an amendment to this action item, because I was just explaining to Kelly, it's essentially saying it only is going to cost this, but really now we have to amend it to say it's actually going to cost a lot more than this. So I would prefer if we bring this back for approval at the work session in February. I know it's cutting it close, and what you could potentially do this evening is give an indication that this is something we could support without it being binding, but then I'd rather come back instead of, based on the restrictions under the Sunshine Act, I would have concern about how we would amend this.
Okay. With that said, I mean, I will just speak for myself. I am absolutely, I think, Dr. Wright, you echoed it in your comments, like in support of our students having the opportunity to participate and compete at states. But yes, I think that probably would be the most prudent action is to vote on it, albeit short notice, at the work session in February.
And just to add to that, it's policy 122 is the one that I'm talking about. So if you want to do some advanced work prior to the next policy meeting, that's 122.
And please, even if you're not part of policy, come to the meeting and feel free to echo any sentiment that's already been shared.
Eric, for what it's worth, I looked up the agenda item from last year. So the agenda item from January 23rd, 2023 states, I'm just reading, the cost of the trip is $450 per student for registration, lodging, meals will be paid for by the student attending. The total cost to the district is for 3 days of substitute coverage for the, I guess these were the chaperones, Mr. Swayer, Ms. Mergurio, Ms. Short, and Ms. Marsalis, as well as $6,000 for transportation, and will be paid from the high school budget.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll
Did you say
look forward to voting on that in February.
6,000.
Okay. Moving on to Section 10 discussion. So this is a conversation with regards to our Spring Forward SNAP post-prom event. So for context, if you did not attend the Finance Committee meeting, there was an agenda item on the Finance, at the Finance meeting last week. What was the date that we had that meeting? Was last week. I'm getting confused with all the snow days.
It was on Wednesday.
It was on Wednesday, so it was not at regular scheduled time, but we did invite SNAP to come to the table to hear them out, given that they did approach the podium at the end of November's board meeting to make a very high-level request of support for this year's event. So rather than me going into the context of it, I would like to invite our SNAP representatives to the podium to fill in our existing board members who were not at finance on what it is that they are asking.
Good evening, board members. Like we said, we spoke at the finance meeting last Wednesday in looking for a request of $15,000 to assist us to pull off this year's post-prom event for the students of the senior class of 2024. At this point in time, our budget does not currently allow us to move forward with having the post-prom paid for. We have an expensive $16,500 that we can use. If we have a minimum of 250 students attend Arnold's this year, we would need $19,875, and that is capping it at 250 students. And just for background information, in 2022, we had over 350, and for 2023, we had about 270-ish. I think the main numbers are in the screens that we sent to you. I'm not sure exactly what other questions you guys might have that we can offer some information.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that. So some of the things that we discussed in finance was, of course, what your ask is, and then talking about the impact of the board potentially turning this down or saying no, that is not the will of the board to support. So can you talk to us a little bit about, like, what are the options if the board ultimately does not support moving forward with this?
You got it?
Yeah, go ahead. So if the board does not decide to grant us some money towards the post-prom, our SNAP board would need to reconvene and decide what we would do for this coming year, which would either be have or not have, and again, it would be extremely limited, even probably less than 250 students at this point with a class size of 700. Or not hold and wait for the class of 2025 parents to pick it up and move forward. That was our two.
Yeah, so thank you. So just, and I'm very aware, I just wanted to make sure everyone else knew that the options really were to not hold it this year and to potentially hold it next year, and then also put a cap, a ceiling on how many students would attend depending on what the funds look like. Another thing that we talked about in finance was with regard to your current fund balance. So I do want to make the board aware that there were some discussions with regards to the current bylaws of SNAP, and so I don't know who wants to take that just to fill us in on where we are with funds and what the situation is there.
Sure. Currently, right now, we do have a balance of about $31,000 in our account. However, again, $16,500 is allocated for this year. The remaining balances are used for contingency funds and emergencies as well. And if we deplete that this year, there won't be one next year. So that's why, and we're only allowed to use 80% of our fundraising from the previous year to fund for the following year.
Thank you. And I'm curious, I know we didn't go into this in finance, but what's the, is there any discussion on reevaluating the bylaws of SNAP to make them more flexible in years like this?
And that has been a conversation that we do need to have at this point, so that is something that we have to bring up as our board as well.
But we're also looking for sustainability. We need new parents and new volunteers to step up to carry this after this year. We have 4 of us that are stepping down. I'm actually misspoke. I'm not even sure how many are stepping down. But there are vacant board positions, so we need some new parents to come forward to evaluate that for next year.
And so if it is the will of the board to support and offer up the $15,000, is next year's event still contingent on filling those board vacancies?
It is not contingent. We would have the remaining funds of what is in our reserve pile for now. There are currently some fundraisers that are in the process or have been scheduled already for sustainability, and then the SNAP Club has also been providing some things that they're going to be doing to donate money towards the SNAP. There are some other grants that we could, again, look to apply for, and then hopefully look for some community donors like we've been doing in the past.
Thank you. And so just for the board, that was basically the extent of our conversation in finance. And I'll echo what I said in finance. I do, support your mission. I've attended and volunteered for your organization. What had me conflicted in finance was largely the balance between, we can support monetarily, but if we do that, is it still a sustainable initiative given what you've shared about your volunteer situation? But that's, that is definitely on my mind. So I would love to, just put the word out for you. I know that you have been doing a great job. I know we connect in terms of trying to drum up support. And you've been in touch with a lot of the other organizations in Springford, but if our parents are listening out there, please look into SNAP if you're not already aware of it, because it is such a worthy cause, and I would hate to see it, I would hate to see it be challenged as a result of lack of volunteers.
I would like to just add, for the class of 2025, there are a handful of some parents that have juniors this year that are looking, along with the students. You had heard from Cassandra Dryberg earlier, that there are a number of parents that will step up. Am I aware that they're going to fill the board positions? That I can't speak for. But looking for the sustainability, hopefully that it will be there. And we do have a couple parents that stepped up to work on the fundraising and carry through to help carry out 2024 if it can happen.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So at this time, I'll defer to the board since we've covered everything discussed in finance. Any questions or comments?
I have
two comments.
After you.
Is the $15,000 a go or no-go decision? So if the board agreed to $10,000, $12,000, would that not make it?
It would determine the total number of students that we could allow to go. That would limit the cap. It depends on how much we receive, because it's $80 per student, and based on that information to be able to say, do we cap it at $250, or can we go up to a higher number if we receive the higher funds?
All right, thank you.
Mrs. Deardorff, and then we'll go to Mrs. Westwood.
I guess my question, and kind of what I apologize, I was on Zoom, so I heard most of your presentation last week, but kind of what I'm gathering from hearing from you guys and talking to the community is that there seems to be a big push to continue this from this year's juniors. So are those of you that are here in the audience, are you guys juniors? Yeah.
Susu is not, I'm sorry.
You're a senior? All right, cool. Thank you for coming. So I think it's important to look at this year versus next year, and as far as that support that you have, right? So I think kind of differentiating how we spoke, that the two options were having it and then really not having the resources for next year, according to your bylaws, or not having it this year, and then being able to sustain and kind of move forward for the class of 2025. Is that accurate?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay. And does administration have a feeling on that either way?
This is a high school event. I'd need to hear from Dr. Collier. I would really want to look at the bylaws. I mean, and again, I tend to look at numbers, right? You said you have 31,000 and you're not allowed to spend more than 80. Well, that's 24.8, and you're saying you can spend about 18 on the event. So I just don't know the bylaws, and I don't want to dive into something I haven't really looked at yet. I think we all agree that it's an important event and that it's very well supported by our administrative team. Whether we make the donation or not, I would want to see that there's a fairly concrete, sustained plan for how you're going to be able to move forward from this. I think this is the third or the fourth time that we've kind of helped out in some way, shape, or form. I see Dr. Collier's back there. I don't know if he wants to weigh in or not to call you out or anything, but I don't have the whole picture. I'd like to see the bylaws and see what that looks like, and maybe it's time for an amendment to the bylaws for sustainability. And again, I'd like to see a plan for how you can fundraise and continue moving forward. But the event needs to happen, in my opinion.
I also...
Go ahead, Mrs. Dordorf.
I just wanted to make sure that Stella had an opportunity to, it seemed like did you have something? No? Okay.
Yeah, Teresa, Mrs. Westwood, you did, but I do want to just clarify one thing that also was brought up in finance before we move on to Mrs. Westwood, which is you do need to have a decision on this by February 1st, correct? Because that is the deadline that Arnold's is giving you, and there really is not any wiggle room with regards to them waiting for a deposit.
That is correct.
Okay. Mrs. Westwood?
Thank you. There are just two things. I had a question and a statement. So one thing I think that came up last week, you talked about some of these fundraising efforts. So I think I've seen there's bingo, there's a dine out event I think that's coming up. Can you talk just very briefly about the amount of money you normally see raised with those sort of events for context for the rest of the board?
So in the past, and unfortunately, prior to COVID, we held our larger basket raffle, which completely covered 1 year of the SNAP program, the event, which is over $30,000. Since COVID has hit, we took a huge loss. I guess our let me see, our numbers for fundraising for the last,
So in 2022, we only raised $11,000. In 2023, we raised $21,000. Now, Dr. Rizzo, just to clarify that 80% rule, it's on the previous year's fundraising that we use for the following year for those funds. So the $30,000 that we have those reserves that are still in the background. So because of what we raised last year, we're only giving it a certain amount that we can spend for this year. So I just wanted to clarify that. So again, those funds have dwindled down for the fundraising efforts.
and so far for 2024, we are waiting on, so far we have $4,100. We're waiting, we have the Prom Boutique, which is in full swing. There is a vendor bingo scheduled for February 9th. There is an Anna Marie's fundraiser scheduled for tomorrow and Thursday through the SNAP Club. Wednesday and Thursday. And then there's also some talk about applying for the Pottstown Health and Wellness Grant again. And then also we should be coming up able to provide an application for the Liquor Control Board. Once again, we have been declined from those in the past, and hopefully know what we need to put in those to hopefully try to get some funds. And again, looking for the community for any kind of donations that we can get.
Thank you. Just one other point, just a clarifying question. Mr. Rizzo mentioned that we've held several times. I'm aware of one such time. I'm curious, has it been several times, or was it, I was aware of once when Mr. Cerisi was on the board. Were there other instances where the board has helped fund SNAP?
I unfortunately cannot speak to that. I know that there was assistance prior to me coming on 9 years ago. I am not aware of that, and I can't speak to that.
I only recall one time.
That's what I'm aware of.
There was one time at the board table.
One time at the board table, correct.
$10,000.
Aaron, can you jump in here?
Sure. The Ed Foundation, which SNAP used to be part of the Ed Foundation, the Spring-Ford Educational Foundation, when SNAP first started, Ed Foundation funded the startup money for $1,000. And then in 2009, also donated an additional $6,000 when the organization was in a similar situation.
Thank you for the context. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. So depending on where we land with the number, it seems like there will be a cap, how many students can attend. Is there a possibility to have parents chip in beyond that cap? Let's say hypothetically, 200 students can attend, and if you have 50 or maybe potentially 500 more students want to attend the class of 700 students, can parents chip in that case?
We have had that discussion before, but we've always offered it as a free event to deter away from anything else that they might want to partake in. I think if we ask the parents to chip in as their students' fee to come in, we will lose more kids at coming. I mean, personally, that's the way I would feel, and I'm not really sure. But we have given that some discussion about, you know, charging them $10 a person and using that towards the fee, but we have not recently discussed it.
Thank you. And I agree, Dr. Sharma. I think that, you know, think about those creative options to be able to bring down the overall cost is important. I do worry a bit, though, about those that might be need-based, and to your point, it might altogether turn students away from the event that otherwise, you know, would have a great experience and, you know, again, support the worthy cause. Mrs. Weingarten.
I just have a quick comment. I had volunteered with SNAP for a number of years and attended at least 2 of the overnight parties. While I didn't make it all night, it's a really remarkable event. For those of you who are not familiar with it, the kids come in, some of them are still dressed in their prom outfits, and it's just a lot of fun. It was even fun for the volunteers as we're watching them from playing all kinds of video games, dancing on the dance floor, eating. It's just a really fun, really positive activity. I imagine, like one of the students spoke earlier and said, you know, having this really special night as part of one of the last big hurrahs with all of your friends and even people you may not know as well. It's a really special night, and it keeps, you're saying, literally hundreds of kids off the roads, and I think that's really remarkable. So I want to thank you all for this tremendous effort. I'm well aware of it, and you know, I appreciate all the time that goes into it.
Thank you.
One other question, just with regards to, again, along the lines of what Dr. Sharma was saying in terms of creative options. What are your thoughts to the extent that, and again, I don't know how feasible this is given your current bylaws or how easy they are to change or reevaluate, but you know, has there been discussion with regards to using the funds that you have this year now, and in the event, you know, fundraising or, you know, you're in a similar situation next year, then coming to the board, like if the fundraising doesn't pan out, like having that conversation next year, like what are your thoughts there?
I mean, we do have to go back and revisit our bylaws.
Okay.
We do know that at this point, and we have not had the opportunity to do that yet.
Okay.
So you're right, that is a possibility that we could do that. However, if we do that, we are going to deplete the majority of what we have, and that's going to also then put for next year into a bad position as well.
And I feel if we start in a bad position for next year, I feel it's going to be counterproductive for those who have to step in and say, oh my goodness, we have to raise how much money in order to go forward with it. And yes, they
the psychological piece of doing that.
It is. And it's very hard to raise money right now with everybody out there trying to do it, and the business is getting hit, and it's difficult.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Weingarten, question?
So the SNAP Club with students, that was just formed this year or last year?
It started oh, here we go.
Within the last year, right?
So the SNAP Club was reinvigorated? probably, I think it was March of last year. It was on a pause for a few years as there was no one to represent, and I stepped in and took over for SNAP Club. We've had probably between 10 and 15 students come to each of the meetings. They're super excited, want to do fundraisers. They want this post-prom, and we're trying to do that for them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Dr. Jackson, I just promoted you there. Dr. Jackson.
So a question this board needs to ask itself is, what happens when the robotics club comes and have an ask? What happened when the surfing club comes to have an ask, the archery class? Yeah, I said surfing. Or any other club within the district. Then what? I mean, you really got to really think this through, and I think on the merit itself, it's wonderful. But you got to consider that. If this is given to SNAP, I don't think there's anything legally, Mr. Fitzgerald, that prevents any other club from coming here and submitting an ask.
Oh, no. I mean, thank you for doing my dirty work. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, can open up a Pandora's box.
And it could have opened up a Pandora's box 9 years ago, but it didn't.
I think that discussion did occur at the table at that time, too, but...
Correct, but was the box open after
No,
that?
no. I see what you're saying. No, but...
At that time, I was on the board, and that was a lively discussed item, and that was the last time that the board presented any funding for this event.
Thank you. Mrs. Westwood?
I just wanted to echo what Mrs. Weingarten said earlier. So I've also had the opportunity to volunteer at this event, and it is a fantastic event for our children. And I would hope that there's the ability to continue it. I think it's a tricky situation, to your point, Mr. Jackson, about if we help fund one club, that opens the other thing. I think there's also the financial, feasibility, which it sounds like you're looking into. I think the reality is that you're a little bit backed up against a wall because of timing to either have a go or no-go decision. I think that makes it tricky, so I appreciate that. I think there's some merit in discussing these creative options a little bit more, and potentially, if it's not the full 15,000, it sounds like there are some options where we could cap. I think last year you said there were about 270 students, so options of feasibility of potentially capping it at the 250, which is not really too far off of what we had last year. And based on what you're estimating for fundraising, is there some middle ground potentially that could be discussed that's not the full 15, but would potentially still provide some support?
Yes, excuse me. Yes, there is. And I think at this point, we'd be grateful for whatever. I'm saying between 5 and 10 potentially. Again, we want to be able to offer this to all of the students who want to attend, and that's where the biggest factor is if we cap it at 250, then what about those other 150 that may, or 100 may want to attend? They won't be able to. So, we're going to appreciate anything. If there is anything that you're able to give us, we will appreciate that very greatly.
Can you increase the number if you get more fundraising? So let's say you're wildly successful with some of your other fundraising efforts. If you go in at 250 and let's pretend there's some amount that's given to allow you to hold it, can you increase the number with Arnold's once it's set in early February?
Yeah, we don't have to have a definitive number to basically that night. Is that correct, Heidi?
We do, but we have to have the minimum of 250 no matter what. And that's what we're committed to with our contract. Right. But I also just want to put out there the sustainability. We've had several fundraising events scheduled. They haven't gotten taken off the ground because we've had nobody attend, or so it kind of was a flop, not on our end, but on anybody attending. So it's not we haven't done it. We've been pushing and trying to do, all of us standing here tonight. So I just want to make it sure that we're just not standing here saying, hand us over some money because we didn't feel like doing anything. That's not the case.
Yeah, and I think that's the question mark in a lot of, at least my mind. So with that said, I appreciate the questions and the comments, but at this point, I think we need to understand if there is a will of the board to support SNAP. Is Ms. Durdorf? Oh, there you are. Sorry, you were hiding behind Mr. Jackson. I thought you had walked away from the table. I didn't want to do a potential vote here. If you were not not with us.
Well, we can't vote this evening.
Correct, not vote, but just in terms of, like, I'm sorry, my apologies, not an official vote, but just a general will of the board to support SNAP. Yes, I'm seeing a yes. Mr. Lackey, a yes.
What does that mean?
So I think the ask is $15,000. Now, if there is conversation among the board to say, I'm not comfortable with that number, I want to make it 12,000, then I would say, bring it up now. My personal opinion is, I mean, if 15,000 is a point where you feel comfortable not having to exclude people who would potentially be interested, I'm in support of the $15,000. You know, like, listen, like, we are always making decisions with regards to balancing what is best for the taxpayer and what is best for the district. But I have a hard time negotiating an ask of $3,000, negotiating an ask of $3,000 for something like this. So that's me personally. So at this point, I think, unless I hear otherwise, the ask on the table from SNAP is $15,000 to support the minimum, at least the minimum of $250 for holding the post-prom event this year in 2024. So is there general support from the board?
Yes.
No.
Okay. I hear a yes, I heard a yes, I heard a yes. Mrs. Deardorff?
What I struggle with is the bylaws piece of it, because you have the money, in theory, but your bylaws prevent you from using it. And I know how tirelessly you have worked to make this happen. I don't think there's a magic fundraiser that's going to appear out of nowhere that's going to bring you in all this money, because I've seen you plan them. I've seen them marketed. My oldest kid is in 4th grade and we know about it. You know what I mean? So I know you've been doing the work, and I just really struggle with the lack of engagement and support from the people that you're trying to put this on for, and the sustainability piece of it. So I want you to know that I don't support us giving you $15,000 tonight in this discussion, but I tremendously support the work that you do and all the effort that you've put into it. But it just doesn't seem like there's a continuum of sustainability of the program. So I would like to see, if possible, and talk more about that bylaw amendment to be able to free up you to use your money, and then kind of put it to the community and say, you're engaged, you've got this club now, you're showing the interest in this. It's time for everybody else to step up and do that, because you guys have been doing it for so long. And thank you for doing that. And so I do see a huge value in this event and the importance of the event. I've been to it as well, and all the wonderful, important things. But I'm just concerned about that sustainability piece and the fact that there is that money there, and it's just because of your bylaws. So that's where I stand on it.
Thank you, Mrs. Deardorff. Mr. Lackey.
Just a clarifying question for Mr. Fitzgerald. When you talk about Pandora's box, can you be a little bit clear about what that potentially looks like?
Well, sure. And Mr. Jackson noted it. This is a affiliated organization, but they're not a district, specific affiliated organization. So maybe the Boy Scouts come next week, or some other club comes and says, our bylaws are limited. We can't use, and we have this coming up that will benefit the kids, but we're looking for support of the board. So it's one of those where another group could come, and what do we do at that point? I would add, I would highly encourage this group to go back and look at their bylaws first. Because if there is money there that can be utilized, that absolutely should be the money utilized. Because if the board is going to expend dollars on this, which they can, we need to know it's not just going to refill a fund balance for them, but it's actually specifically going to the event itself to connect to our kids. So I would think that should be the first, inquiry. Can they revise their bylaws and utilize that money in the first place? And then, to the extent they can, then maybe it's a fallback here. That would be my suggestion with how that would be
Is that
used.
feasible before February 1st?
I don't know if it is or it isn't.
It probably should be. I mean, we have to have a meeting after this meeting, obviously, to determine what's going on. So I believe we can go back and we can change it to have that. But then the question becomes also then, okay, once we deplete it, we're still in the same predicament for next year. And that's kind of where we are. And again, we understand and we're grateful for any support that you're able to give us. And that's where our biggest thing is at this point. And that was the reason that that 80% was put into place originally, to help for some lean years as well, because when we were here 9 years ago, it was prior to all of us on that board at that point, coming to the board and asking for funds at that time.
Well, and that also, if I was a sophomore or junior working on this, and I'm helping do fundraisers, I'm planning, I'm doing all these things, it's a party for the senior proms. So the students who are not seniors are vested in having one for themselves in due time. And I think that's really where I'm guessing that bylaw was written, because if I work for 3 years to help plan a party every year, and then it's my turn and I don't get it, that's where a lot of that unfairness fits in. And I know we can't always solve for that, and sometimes that's just the way it falls. But I think a large part of this relatively new, which makes it a very positive step from the students, a relatively new student group to support this program, to get the word out. A lot of those students are not necessarily all seniors, right? So they're working so that they can have this for their class. And then the younger students come in so that there's longevity. What do they say? Every 3 years you can create a new pattern. And that's where we are. A lot of this the momentum was lost during COVID. I remember when we had this at the school, my children were very small, and we would come here and they'd run around, and there was all kinds of activities. It was pretty incredible. And again, dwindling involvement, a better lineup, essentially, a better option in terms of setup, cleanup, and all of those good things. Fewer volunteers, I think, were necessary in terms of guarding the hallways, right? So I think moving it to Arnold's was probably a really smart idea. But unfortunately, that momentum was lost because, was it 2 years that it couldn't happen?
Correct.
Right? So I think that's really where, my guess is where this kind of chasm happened for you. So I appreciate where why the bylaws were written that way. It's just a matter of figuring if we can pull this off for these students and figure out a way so that the students who have been working on it, because it would be the juniors were in 8th grade, if I'm remembering correctly. Those juniors were in 8th grade during COVID. So when they came back freshman year, no one heard of this, right? So by the time they're sophomores, they're hearing about it. So that puts us where we are today. So I think understanding that extra funding, that buffer, is basically built in to keep that momentum going. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mrs. Weingarten. So going back to Mr. Lackey, because you asked the question of Mr. Fitzgerald, does your answer change?
No. It sounds like the risk is just that other groups might ask. I was
Okay.
wondering if there was anything more than that.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, I have 3 yeses. Dr. Wright?
Regarding supporting this, and you know what, and I, as everyone has spoken, I think the program is wonderful. I support it, and I hope that we can find a way to continue. My concern is the legal aspects of an agreement right now when we can't be voting. It is presenting to me as a commitment, and I'm not comfortable with that. If there were truly a specific vote in front of us, I would be open to considering that, but I think we are on the cusp here of a concern where we are asking for a commitment at the board, which is a vote.
So, Mr. Fitzgerald, what is your take on that? Because do we have 5 that support yes or no. I mean, you need to make sure that you have 5. So what
Sure.
is the delineation there?
Well, I mean, this is more of a non-binding, vote. I mean, it's a straw vote. They could equally, 30 days from now, say, we're not supporting it. So in other words, what occurs on February 1st, the board may give an indication that they're supporting this or there's a majority support, but it's non-binding. And they may sour on doing anything, and you have to understand that that's a possibility. So that's really what the delineation is. There's nothing legally binding about what the board is discussing here.
Thank you very much.
May I make another comment, Erica?
Yes, Mrs. Westwood.
With the information that your bylaws can be changed, I think I was under the impression that perhaps that wouldn't be feasible within the time frame. I do think Mrs. Deerdorf brings up a good point. If that is feasible, that does give additional time to consider. Like, I do agree that there's some concerns with the sustainability. I mean, I've talked to a number of you after the meeting last week, and it seems like there's some momentum. It would be nice to see that momentum continue, because I do worry a little bit about winding up in a situation where even if you do get the money, do you have the people and the manpower to do the fundraisers needed, the volunteering, et cetera? I also am just wondering if this can't be a standing vote and you need something by February 1st. Do we even have enough time, Mr. Fitzgerald? Like, that's what I'm curious about.
No, I mean, unless you call a special meeting for February, before February 1st, you're not going to be able to vote on a binding action tonight.
So then is it more prudent to consider changing the bylaws, because that's something that you could do in time if we can't make a binding decision in time for their
Yeah,
deadline?
as I mentioned, I do encourage that of this group. And I candidly, I think the board needs more time to consider its financial options, at least legally, because they can't do it tonight.
So with that said, Mr. Fitzgerald, what was the context? I know it's 9 years ago, but can you share the context in which that initial support of $6,000 was done? I mean, was that a vote, or was that a will of the board?
Well, it was a vote. It was a vote because those are the good old days when you could put a vote just
at the table
like that.
It was $10,000.
And it was 10,000. Yeah, and it occurred in a very similar type of situation they had presented. Now, at the time, in my recollection, again, a long time ago, I don't recall a deep discussion about bylaws and or money in the bank or not. It sounded more dire 9 years ago, to be candid, from what my recollection was of that discussion. But again, that was a while back.
I haven't heard from Dr. Sharma or Mrs. Goldsmith any additional comments or questions with regards to anything that has been mentioned.
So I echo the same sentiments. I think it's a great organization. I really do. I think it's an important organization. I think the goal is to try to support all organizations. I mean, I think DECA is important too. One of the concerns I share is what Mr. Fitzgerald said is about this being public funding, we giving it in situations where there is existing funding without the exploration of potentially changing the bylaws at that point in time, because if the public funds are received and they're not necessarily used for the students, there's no plan in place for that money to be reimbursed, or how is that money held. If for some reason it does go, the organization goes away next year, what happens to those public monies? So I have concerns about that. I also think in terms of one of my concerns is that if we make a commitment at this point in time, right now the sustainability, are we kind of at some level committing to a longer term situation? I know we're not, from a practical perspective, but it still kind of sets a precedence of the support of the expectations going forward and having a plan in place. And I know it sounds like you guys have started it to really continue the organization, because I think it should continue, I think is really important. So at this moment, I echo the other concerns of the other board members about, supporting the organization at this time.
Thank you, Mrs. Goldsmith. Dr. Sharma, anything else you want to add?
No, I think we have covered everything.
Thank you very much. So at this point, it sounds like that it is not the will of the board, that if we do want to pursue this in the future, that we give more time and maybe think about having a formal action item on the agenda to be able to do that. And again, your deadline is February 1st, correct? And, okay. So what I would say is, I don't want this to be the end of the conversation. And again, I am speaking only for myself, but I do not want you to hesitate to come to the board again, whatever that ask is for, if we're talking about changing bylaws to use your funds for this year, I do, want to keep in mind next year and talk about what progress has been made with fundraising, what momentum there is with regards to volunteers, to be able to revisit this conversation.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, with that said, we're moving on to informational. You can see that the mileage rate has changed from 67 cents a share. My goodness, I am mixing my work and my volunteer life. 67 cents a share, and Mrs. Westwood is laughing. Great. 67 cents per mile to 1.5 cents per mile. Wait, increase of 1.5 cents, excuse me. Thank you very much. So for a total of 65.5 cents. So there you go. With that said, board comment. I would like to start because I did allude to something earlier in the meeting with regards to the Spring City American Legion. So as you may know, we appointed in December 2 representatives to the Spring City American Legion, one being Mr. Lackey and the other being Mrs. Weingarten. And at that time, it was Mr. Reese that had approached the podium and said, hey, I want to look into this. I don't know how that would marry with, our operations. Since then, Mr. Reese, as well as, I'm looking at Mr. Reese, Mr. Walt's last name. What is his last name? What is it? Kazicki, thank you very much. Reached out to me to share their thoughts around evaluating the appointment in December and bringing it down to one position. So in talking to Mr. Fitzgerald, what I would like to ask is of Mr. Lackey and Mrs. Weingarten, if there would be anyone who would be willing to relinquish their seat as the Spring City American Legion representative.
I'm happy to, well, I don't want to say happy. I'm reasonably convinced to relinquish my seat, but if needed, I'm happy to help out because I've really enjoyed talking to Mr. Reese. And to be honest, I can't attend on Thursday.
So, and there is nothing that absolutely precludes any of our board members in attending any of the Spring City American Legion meetings. So with that said, Mrs. Weingarten is relinquishing her seat. Mr. Fitzgerald, from your standpoint, is there anything else that needs to be done?
No, we still have somebody in Mr. Lackey appointed, and we can proceed accordingly.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Any other board comment?
I have something. Oh, do you want to go?
Yeah. I just want to take a minute to thank Mr. Rizzo, Dr. G, Dr. Murray, the administration, and the staff, just for all your efforts during the onboarding. It was great getting all the new members up to speed quickly, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I second that. Thank you.
That was the easy part.
So I just wanted to add a little additional information to Mrs. Westwood's legislative report regarding House Bill 1422, which is sponsored by Representative Cerisi. So that did pass the House over the summer and then was sent to the Senate Education Committee in July. So that's where it will sit until that committee decides to pick it up and discuss it. So right now, if you go to the Senate Education Committee's website, they have no meetings scheduled at this time. So we had discussed it's about $1 million perhaps, that if this reform were to be made, that would kind of come back to our district. So if anyone is interested in moving that Senate bill forward, I would encourage you to reach out to Senator Argall, A-R-G-A-L-L, David Argall, who is the chair of the Education Committee. He's out of Carbon, Luzerne, and Schuylkill counties. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other board comment?
Yes, I have a board comment. Just understanding, as you are all aware, the importance and complexities of the budget, especially at this time of year. And I've always tried to stay involved in the discussions. This is my 5th year on the board. However, I'm learning more and more all the time, continue to learn about budgets, and I have worked in school districts most of my career, and again, I've seen it from different aspects, but I continue to learn. And if, just as a reminder with regards to the budget, that I'm the only sitting board member who voted against last year's budget. And a major piece of the advice that was given at the time, and rightfully so, was to ask questions early and to be involved. So with that in mind, I did put in a request this past week. I wrote an email requesting to set up time to meet with Mr. Fink, our CFO, to discuss the budget and any other pertinent information, since I've had the time. And also, I was unable to attend the last finance meeting because the date and time, or the date was moved due to the weather. And when I looked on the board information that we have, even as late as Friday, or actually to this morning, today, there were no minutes from that meeting, so I really didn't know, fully what had occurred. But I was told that when my request went to administration to speak with Mr. Fink for no more than an hour, that the vice president and president of the school board told me that I could not meet with him, and that the discussions needed to take place at the finance committee meetings, and that if I had questions, they could be asked ahead of time, and at the next meeting, there would be responses there for me. So I have to say that I was very surprised and shocked that this was not something that I had ever experienced in the past, and I tried to always be very respectful of the administration's time. So that really did surprise me that I was denied that. So I do have a couple questions I will pose tonight that can be answered at a later date. That's fine to Mr. Fink or to the administration. But I just wanted to kind of also put out there that if this is a new procedure, and whether it is that about not being able to meet with the administration for individual things, because I actually had other questions for another committee with other questions that I guess I hesitant now to reach out to get additional information. If my job is to get questions answered and to get information, how I can go about this when I can't, if I can't attend a meeting, and even above and beyond that too. As you know, it's a very complicated process. So anyway, if it's for all board members too, if at any time, or just for me. So anyway, with that in mind, I do have my 2 questions. One of them is regarding technology and accessing documents, previous ones, not just the budget documents that are on the website, but I know last year I was able to get a line item budget. I would like to have if we have that now, I'd like to be able to access that. I'd also like to know where the presentations are stored and stuff. So this is maybe more a technology question. It's just been a while since I looked for these things, so I'm asking of administration that somebody reach out to me, whether it's an email or at the next finance meeting or something, about a little tutorial on where on the websites or on our Canvas I can access all the documents except presentations or line item documents, things like that. My other ask is that we have a policy which is based on a state Pennsylvania School Code, that policy 619, that the completed audit shall be presented to the board for its examination and approval by an outside audit agency. We use Mailey, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, to do our year-end audits. Our audit was for the year ending June 30th, 2023. It was posted on our website. Mr. Fink put it up there, I guess our technology did, so that it is right there for us all to access, anybody in the district or anybody. On December 8th was when Maley sent it. So at some point it was put up there. But my understanding from from the policy is that the audit will be presented to the board for its examination and approval. The audit is addressed to the Board of School Directors, and it's very well done, and congratulations to our department, or our school or district for doing a good job. But I feel that for like the purpose of fidelity, that this should be presented by someone from Maley, either at a finance committee meeting or at the board table here at a board meeting, so that our community also can be aware of where we stand. It's basically an audit of whether our district is handling the finances properly. And so that is, I guess, kind of my ask is what has been the practice in the past, and if this could be a practice. We are, specifically says we are not complying right now with with our policy, because it says it should be presented to the board for its examination and approval, and we haven't had that done. So this is just 2 questions that I have at this time. They don't need to be answered now. I am glad to wait for those to be answered. So
Thank you, Dr. Wright. Mr. Fink, I know that Dr. Wright, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Jackson.
Dr. Wright.
No, Mr.
Made
Jackson.
an allegation against the president and the vice president.
I am speaking, and then I will allow you to address that. Thank you very much. Mr. Fink, Dr. Wright spoke for quite a few minutes with regards to her 2 questions, and I know that those are questions that right now cannot be answered on the moment because it does require more information from your part. Would it be helpful if Dr. Wright sent those questions in an email to you so that we can make sure we could talk about them publicly in the open, in the sunshine, with all of our board members at the next Finance Committee meeting?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And so just for our new board members, I do understand sometimes understanding board protocol and process, can be hard, but we like to make sure that if one board member is getting information, that all board members are getting that same information. And so the ask from administration, as Dr. Wright knows from having sat in my seat previously, is that when there are invested and detailed questions as it relates to something as significant as this year's budget, that question goes to administration so that it can be talked about openly and they can have a well thought out response. So with that said, we'll look forward to having that conversation in February. Thank you, Dr. Wright, for sending that information to Mr. Fink. Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, Madam President. I've been the finance chair for, I think, close to 5 years. So when Dr. Wright says she's going into her 5th year, I'm not sure what part of the budget she doesn't understand. It is the same process, the same dance we do every year. In December, the preliminary budget is uploaded, as I said in the email back to you, Dr. Wright. It is uploaded to the district website, first week of December. So every community member, including yourself, can look at that budget. There are finance meetings. And last year, yes, I did ask that questions be submitted so Mr. Fink and his team could properly do their due diligence and provide a proper response. So that is not something that's new. You were not denied access to information. This is public information that every member of this community has because it's on the website. And it's been on the website every year that I've been involved with this board, and that's going close to a decade now. So I do take exception to your statement that you are being denied. I don't know if the issue is you don't understand the budget, which I think that's more of it, but to sit here and say that the leadership is denying you is categorically false and not true. So I would encourage you, along with other board members, come to the meetings. If you cannot come to a meeting, Zoom in, which I don't support, but Zoom into the meeting. And if you can't come to the meeting, you can't Zoom in, submit a question. Why is there the need to give you this attention for you to get information, and now the other 8 board members don't have the same information? Now there's a disconnect on finances. This is a budget. It is not that complicated. It is the same budget and profile and this complexity you make reference to that is here every year. Thank you.
I'd like to respond to that. I am flattered that you think that the budget is not complex and I should be able to pick it up very quickly, but I would say that that is not the case, that there is very involved. They think the line item, it's 100 pages or something like that, and we're talking about close to $200 million. I was denied the opportunity to meet with Mr. Fink, not denied access to the information, to the opportunity to meet with him. So that's it. And I also would like to know whether this is standing policy for all of the board members if they are not to be able to meet at their request with an administrator, or just as this is a one-time.
So I'm going to disagree with your statement. You were denied the opportunity to meet with Mr. Fink. You were offered the opportunity to meet with Mr. Fink publicly in the open with all of our other board members and to not have individual information funneled only to you and not the other 8 members. With that said, I hear what you're saying with regards to it's only 1 hour, but Mr. Fink, if he's meeting only 1 hour with you, then he's only timesing that by 9 to meet only 1 hour with everybody else. So in order to make the best use of everybody's time, including our administration, to be able to do their day job of running this district and making sure that everyone is on the same page with regards to the conversation information, we encourage those conversations to happen in public. Of course, those conversations, like onboarding our new crew members, oh my gosh, I am so in the work right now. Onboarding our new board members, I look at Teresa. This is going to really mess me up because when I look at you, I'm going to say crew member instead of board member. Onboarding our new board members, there is a difference between having deep, detailed conversation on line items in the budget versus, for example, Mrs. Westwood meeting with Mr. Fink as a new committee member on finance to understand generally what does the budgetary process look like. So there are onboarding activities that require one-on-one time with our administrators, and then there are discussions about the business of this district that should happen in public where everyone has the opportunity to hear that question and also hear the response. So I hear what you're saying in terms of it's only an hour, but I'm going to disagree that you were denied any opportunity to meet with Mr. Fink. You always have the opportunity to meet with Mr. Fink. In fact, he is here tonight. Thank you very much. Any other board comment?
I have a question. Dr. Wright mentioned a policy regarding the presentation of the audit. Mr. Fitzgerald, can you speak to this statement, or Mr. Fink, that we are in violation of that policy? Because that was made mention of. So I just want to clarify that for us and for the community.
Well, Jim, I have the policy up.
So I can say that in the past, we have not done a formal presentation of the audit. The audit has been available to board members and to the public on our website.
Yeah.
For reading. And Dr. Wright is correct. It is addressed to the board. That's how all audits are always done, whether you're in public schools or in corporate, or to the audit committee at least. But those at the school district, since I've been here and have never been asked to do a presentation on an audit, that would be new business for me.
So
yeah. I mean, so again, the policy does state the completed audit shall be presented to the board for its examination and approval. I don't know if that requires a formal vote. The law, you could argue that within the policy. The law speaks to it a little differently, and let me get that up. I was just looking at it, which is, trust me, this is one of those sections of the school code you never get to. And it simply said that the findings of the auditor from the preceding year shall be filed with the Board of School Directors, entered on the minutes of the board by the secretary thereof, and forwarded to the superintendent of public instruction. I mean, this is from like 1940-something. A copy of such report shall also be theoretically filed with the intermediate unit. So that doesn't necessarily require a vote, but it would probably require that. So our audit usually comes back around this time of year from last year, that it would probably have to be just simply entered almost as an informational item on the meeting minutes. I think that would probably suffice under the law.
Thank you very much. I think that this is a great question, all the more reason why, if you do have complex questions like this, to give our administration a heads up, as it's been a repeated ask, so that we can have a well thought out response and also not put our solicitor on the spot to kind of, have some conjecture here as to what may or may not be. We just want to make sure that we are giving a well thought out and meaningful response when it comes to those things. So, Dr. Wright, looking forward to that email to Mr. Fink. Any other questions or comments?
I would like to mention that I did bring this up previously, and so I'm glad that I could bring it up at the table. And thank you, Mrs. Deardorff, for asking for the follow-up for that we could have the clarification here in public. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd love to see that in writing.
I just wanted to make another, I do believe that in a recent finance meeting, the audit was reflected in the PowerPoint presentation that Mr. Fink presented. So I would think that would perhaps count.
It probably would, because do it in kind of a roundabout way here, but it was probably presented at finance. Finance minutes are then essentially brought forward through, back to the board itself. So we are likely in compliance with the law, at least for how the law is written. Our policy, it's a little bit more nuanced, but ultimately from a legal compliance issue, which is what keeps me up at night, I think we're okay in that regard.
Thank you, Mrs. Deardorff, for recalling that. Again, it's having a little forewarning definitely can bring up clarity like that, where we're not just speculating on how things are.
Actually,
So,
I'd like to
with
see that because
said-
I looked and I was not able to see it reflected in any of the minutes from the Finance
Yep.
Committee in the past. So
And we
I'll
will-
ask that in
We
my
will have
email to you.
that discussion in finance come, what date is the meeting in February?
Next month.
Next month, second Tuesday of the month, 6 p.m. Thank you.
So we have sat here and talked about budget and the struggles with that, and now we want to get into the nitty-gritty of an audit. This will be interesting. Thank you.
All right. Any other board comment? Thank you very much. Well, with that said, before we move on to public to be heard, welcome Mrs. Westwood, Mr. Lackey, Dr. Sharma, and Mrs. Goldsmith. I'm very excited to have you at the table. I know we didn't formally say anything in the beginning, but welcome.
Did pretty good on time.
Yeah. With that said, we're going to move on to public to be heard, and this can be on any items, not just agenda items. If you'd like to speak, please feel free to approach the podium with your name as well as your township of residence.
Hi, Steve Frog, Royersford. I guess first, since we're on the topic of compliance with policy, you might want to take a look at the EDI policy. I believe you're due an annual report on EDI project progress. Not sure that's happened recently. You might want to look at that. As just follow up on curriculum and comment I had at curriculum technology, the PSSA test results seem to indicate that one of our schools has been more significantly impacted by COVID policies than others. Their scores are significantly lower than the other schools. It's very unclear if the various interventions we've undertaken are having a desired impact. It's now been several years and their scores are not moving upward like you would expect. So when I asked about this at the committee meeting, I was told something to the effect of, this is not the time to have that question answered. But there's no indication if there will ever be an answer to that question or if we're ever even going to look into the problem. So again, it would be nice to understand if there's going to be someone to follow up on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Stacy Fonash, Collegeville, PA. My phone is dying, so I just wanted to ask one thing. I think what would help the SNAP board might be, I know administration helps a lot and does a lot of things, but I know there was one issue where a poll was supposed to be done in English class to gauge how many seniors were interested in attending the event this year, and it was never done, and I think they only got 100 kids to reply. And I know kids are kids and they kind of decide at the last minute, but I think if someone could help out at the school end, maybe get that, maybe redo a poll, see how many kids are interested this year, that would be very helpful. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Hi. Happy New Year. Mary Jo McNamara, Royersford, Limerick, Pennsylvania. Sorry. So I think I just had a couple of random thoughts, and I apologize. I'm not prepared. I wasn't prepared to give comment tonight, but after sitting here and listening, I do have a couple of things. One for the SNAP program. It's a huge program. I think I was probably one of the people around when SNAP started, right? And we did do the walkthrough with Dr. Culp, and we all came in here, and it was a great time. I think there's been a couple of meetings that the SNAP board's been at looking for funding, I thought. I didn't think this was their first one. I wasn't at finance, but I guess it's just an afterthought. I wish we had brought up, could they re-examine their bylaws prior to January 22nd, maybe for some guidance. I don't know. I want the program to continue. I wish I was able to volunteer to help out. My second comments are related to the budget. So I've sat through this for a few years too as a community member, and I guess it would be really nice if we had like a primer on the budget. And I don't know as a community member how to look at upwards of 90 pages of line items. I don't know that I need to know. I would like to be able to support and ask questions ahead of time and those kinds of things, but I don't know how we have 4 new board members and you're just getting the budget in December and you have to make a vote by the end of May. And not the budgetary process, which Mr. Jackson and I appreciate, right? It's the same thing every year. We have deadlines, we have dates, there's uploads, there's presentations. But to really understand the line items that you're looking at and voting on, right? And we've been consistently since, I don't know when, there's a $25 million increase in the past 4 years. And they're all within the state index, right? And we do the same exception every year to vote over it to get a cushion. I just don't know how you know, unless you're like complete brilliant finance people, how you know. So while I appreciate Dr. Wright's comments, I don't understand how we go through one meeting a month that's held pretty strictly to an hour now, right? We used to go over and used to allow time for conversation. That doesn't happen anymore. So those committee meetings are an hour long. So that gives you 5 hours between now and May 30th to vote on $204 million. That is not simple. Sorry. Is that my time? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else that would like to approach the podium? Okay. With that said, meeting adjourned. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.